Hello and welcome everyone to Custom Journeys. We have a title.
Yeah, we do. We
We
here.
we're here. We have a title. We're Custom Journeys. Welcome. Hey,
Yep.
how's it going, Andrew?
It's going good, man. I'm glad to be here on the podcast, recording another episode. I'm really excited about this one, right? Because this one, for a lot, I don't know, depending on how we order these things, but this is kind of like the genesis, the beginning. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we here? And like, we're gonna discuss like I got a lot of good things about what we're hoping to accomplish with this podcast. So, I'm excited, man. I'm glad to do this. And how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm enjoying the first hot AF day here in San Antonio. Uh, yeah, it's crazy to think a couple weeks ago, it was like the frozen apocalypse here. And then now it's like a high of 88. Probably gonna be a high, yeah, of 88 today.
Yeah. Now
Here.
I'm enjoying this, man. Spring is here. It's just for me, it's the allergies, right? Because the allergy season has started, and then for some reason, I guess everybody in the city of Houston is cutting grass today, so it's just like making it worse. But I'm excited. I'm
One of the
enjoying the weather.
silver linings of this pandemic is being stuck inside for me. It's not having to go outside where the scary allergens are like to hang out. Yeah, my car is covered in tree pollen, but that's like I don't know if that happens in Houston, but in San Antonio it's a pretty big problem. A lot of a lot of cedar. Um, but
Yeah,
but regardless, my allergies are terrible. But anywhere I go, but yeah, man. Yeah, this is I guess this is our episode 0. You know, we recorded a couple of really awesome, badass interviews. We have a couple more scheduled that I think will y'all the audience will be excited about. And but no, we really wanted to like sit down and talk about our underlying motivation for this podcast. And yeah, I mean, Andrew, you're the one that called me asking me, hey, you want to do a thing? And yeah, you want take it from there.
yeah, man. So we're partners, co-hosts in this, but yeah, I'll kind of start off with just I guess I could start by like reading the part of the podcast description or talking a little bit about the podcast description, and I'll just kind of be unscripted as well. But what we have written down on paper is that this podcast is about empowering Black and Brown kids to seek out a career in STEM, and we aim to provide guidance, encouragement, and resources to young people of color that are interested in STEM. And along the way, we're also going to discuss some of the barriers that prevent uh, minorities from going into STEM and how we feel like we can overcome those barriers and what resources are out there. So, resources being mentoring, different programs, different partnerships between like universities or companies. Um, and then also as well like financial resources, so like scholarships and grants and things of that nature. But just to kind of go off script, I guess, and be more natural, this kind of started for me, and I guess we'll kind of get into it now.
Yeah.
So man, so like I'll kind of tell like a brief story. So probably like around 2014, 2013, 2014, um I kind of had the idea of, hey, I want to start like a nonprofit and
Mm-hmm.
start giving scholarships to kids back in Houston. At the time, I was living in San Antonio. Um, so what I did was I texted my brother and my sister. I was like, yo, what do y'all think about starting a scholarship? And I was getting ready to graduate with my master's in mechanical engineering. And so anyway, I texted them. They was like, yo, I'm down. I'm down. And so we come from like a very like service oriented family. My grandparents on both sides were like real big in the church. And so like they did a lot of community stuff. And then my parents, my
Baptists.
dad, I guess, yeah. I don't really, I guess I'm kind of like non-denominational, but yeah, we kind of grew up in like Baptist churches and stuff. Um, but yeah, man, yeah. We'll talk about church
We'll
one
talk
day,
about that
maybe.
in a bit. I'm very curious. Okay, go ahead.
No, no,
I
no,
didn't know
no
that.
worries.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but no, my dad, he was he's a preacher and he was a pastor at one point of a
Oh
church.
wow.
And so yeah, I can recall distinctly like doing different community oriented stuff. So like having like food kitchens per se, or like doing like food and pantry stuff for people that didn't have food or clothing or whatnot. So anyway, long story short, service is like in our blood, and like that's kind of a way that we were kind of raised up. And so yeah, that always kind of stuck with me. So I think that's part of the motivation for me wanting to start a nonprofit, along with the fact of that, like I said before, or like I said in another episode, I recall like being in these classes and like seeing like maybe being like one of five black faces in there. And I'm like, yo, this is not right. We gotta do something about this. So my idea was like, yo, maybe this nonprofit, we can provide scholarships. And I knew there were financial barriers in the way for me. Starting off, I had to take out a lot of loans. Towards the end of my academic career, I was fortunate enough to have scholarships, so it eased the burden. But I just wanted to make something that was able to help students that didn't want to go into college or didn't want to pursue STEM because of the financial barrier. So we started the nonprofit. It was actually ended up, I think it was like me, my wife, and my brother who ended up starting it off. And then we started giving out scholarships to kids. And we did that for like 3 years, I think. And then it kind of fizzled out between me living in Detroit, me and my wife living in Detroit at the time. And then it was just a lot going on. So, but recently, I'd probably say, probably took like a 2 year break. But then along the way, me and Eli started kind of talking more. And Eli, you kind of reached out to me about doing like a guest interview for one of the classes you were lecturing,
Right, right,
and
right,
you just want to kind of have some people come in and give a talk to the students about, hey, what is it like to be a professional in STEM? Like, what are some things that you've done
right.
as an engineer? Now, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I felt like it was really dope, and
Awesome.
also I felt like it had a lot of impact. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall that hey, I'm more of an introverted person,
Mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I still had that passion, that desire to give back. And um, I felt like, yo, podcasts are like really taking off. I'm a big fan of podcasts like Earn Your Leisure and the Come Up series. Those are like financial podcasts. I was like, yo, I got to step out there, like step out of my shell and get behind the mic. And I was like, yo, I want to do this, but at the same time, I knew I could not do it by myself. Um, it was just gonna be way too much, and I wanted to partner up with somebody that I felt had a similar passion and desire to give back and help increase the number of minority students pursuing STEM. So no lie, I told you this, Eli. Eli, you were the first person I text. I was like, all right, I gotta start off with Eli. He's working on a PhD. He's already kind of done something similar with his
Yeah.
series that you were doing at Trinity, where you were interviewing STEM professionals. So I text Eli like, "Yo, let's do this podcast. I got an idea to do a podcast. This is what I kind of want to do." And you text me back immediately like, let's do it. And I was like, all right, cool. So it was a lot easier. It's kind of like, when you're young and you see like, okay, don't take it the wrong way, but it's kind of like when you're young and you're trying to build up that courage to like text some girl or whatever. You're like, yo, let me text Eli. I was trying to build up that courage. I'm like, man,
Oh,
Eli gonna
okay.
say no. Eli
Okay.
gonna be like, man, I'm trying to graduate with my PhD. But I just text you. I was like, yo, let's see what happens. And then you were like, let's do it. And then we talked on the phone for like an hour or two
Yep.
right after that. And then we were
Yep.
like, yo,
Yep.
we were both really passionate and excited about it. So, um, yeah. And then we were here, man. So we were like, yo, let's go ahead and start recording. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how the podcast started. And then I don't know if you want to hop in and give your
Yeah.
perspective, but that's kind
Yeah.
of how things originated.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts. First of all those things are true. I am working on my PhD, and
Still
still, um,
almost done.
almost done. Almost done. I like these podcasts we're doing kind of weekly, so it's like a kind reminder to finish up. We gotta wrap this up. Wrap it up. But yeah, no, uh, I remember when I was a couple years ago. I was an adjunct faculty full time at Trinity, and I know my background is UTSA, but I'm kind of so yeah. I'm in both worlds right now. Um, but at Trinity, I had the opportunity to teach a design course. And in the design course, there's lots of flexibility with time because the students are mostly working on their design projects. And so there's a little bit of free time in the curriculum that semester. And so I thought it might be, I took the opportunity to invite, at first, the idea was to invite alumni from the Trinity community to come talk to the students about life after Trinity, and with the purpose of showing how some of the pathways after Trinity, even with an engineering science degree, aren't necessarily going to be in engineering, or your most successful pathways are not always going to be in engineering. But having an engineering degree still sets you up well to succeed in other pathways. So I try to diversify the the careers that I expose to the students. But what ended up happening is a lot of the guests I ended up having had a foot in academia and in industry, which is a nice coincidence. And also, I ended up this wasn't intentional, but it ended up being the case. Half were women, half were male. I think I had like 12 or 13 or 14 guests that semester. Actually, I was very fortunate to have them on. And I think what helped is that I allowed people to come on through Zoom, and that made things much easier. Anyway, so Andrew was the last guest of the semester, uh, best for last.
There you
But
go.
the students got a real well-rounded view of your experience at Rice and GM, and I think they appreciate that the most. I think you're one of their favorite guests, Andrew. Yeah, and yeah, very fortunate that that happened, and I'm glad you came on. I think that was a wonderful conversation, and I'm glad it inspired you to make that phone call. Um, but yeah, I think it's a happy coincidence here because I always had it in the back of my mind to do a podcast or do some kind of show where I could express some of my experiences and my thoughts about higher ed, especially in STEM, because I always felt as though my path, a lot of things went my way. Don't get me wrong, I work extraordinarily hard to get where I'm at, but a lot of things did break my way. And if specific resources weren't placed in front of me at specific times, I would not have succeeded. And I always have felt it in the bottom of my heart that I owe my community my perspective so they can also make use, take advantage of the resources I was fortunate, blessed to be exposed to. So that's really kind of the underlying motivation for me to participate. So as soon as you make the phone call, that's why my answer was just immediately yes. This is something I've always been wanting to do, and I think doing it with you, Andrew, having someone to do it with, makes this a lot easier to bear than if I were to do it alone. I would not be able to do this alone. So I'm very thankful that you made that phone call.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm glad it worked out too. And I think we both realize, you can go a lot further when you're working with somebody than trying to do everything on your own. And they took me, to be honest, it took me a while to learn that. I was so used to, like, in school, you're kind of taught like do your own work, like don't work with others.
Yeah.
Like they don't really encourage, or they didn't, I should say, at least back in like the '90s, early 2000s. Like they didn't really encourage as much like teamwork. It's more so do your work, like work on it yourself. And I think once you start to go through college, you get more collaborating
Yep.
going on, and I realized, hey, I can like we can both independently try to do this on our own separately in our different silos, but we're not going to go nearly as far as if we partner up on this. And one of the things that you said that interests me, and as we start to interview guests, I really want to hear people's feedback on this. Is you talked about like that sense of like having to give back, like you felt like in a way like I made it, so to speak. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've been successful, I set my goals, I accomplished what I wanted to do. I made it to some level of success, and really a pretty significant level of success. You're at the point where you're about to have your dissertation complete and be
Right.
a doctor, Dr. Iglesias. So I mean
Oh yeah.
that's a pretty significant feat. Um, but yeah, no, I wanna find out other people's perspectives on, like, do they feel that sense of like having to help, having to give back? I felt the same thing. Like I don't have a PhD, but like even when I
Yeah.
graduated with my bachelor's, when I graduated with my master's, when I went to when I went to GM, like it was always like in my mind, like, yo, I gotta like help other people like get to this point. And I think for me, it was like you hear about like the struggles of Black and brown people, from a like a generational standpoint, from a financial standpoint, and you're like, okay, what can we do to help our people succeed? And I think like there's a whole, I think that entrepreneurship is a big part of it,
Right.
and like there's a really big entrepreneurship, like explosion happening or a movement happening.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like there's also entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. And I feel like there's a really big need is 100% there's going to be a need for more STEM professionals. If you look at technology and the way things are going, we have to have more people that are talented and have the skills. So I think, hey, how can I help fill that need and help Black and brown people be better off financially? And I saw how much money I was making. I was like, yo, we got to help like more people do this and have access to this
Right.
and get more interested in it. So I'm curious to see if other people have that desire and passion to give back as well, or if that feels like, is that kind of like built into all of us, or is it kind of like particular based on your background, you know?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, not only, I mean, 100% we just said, but also I would add, even if students, the general public, don't go into STEM, it is so important that people are technology, math, science literate. Because
Yeah.
especially now, a lot of decisions from government, from at every level, is based on data at the end of the day. And so it's so important that people are informed, are literate in math and science, even if their career is not, STEM. Because you can see it in society right now. I mean, I won't mention anything specific, but there's a lot of ignorant stuff going on.
Boy, I said
So
ignorant.
ignorant.
There you go.
Is that what the kids say?
Nah, that's what I've heard that all the time.
I think that's what we said when we were kids. I don't
I
know.
know I heard my mama or daddy or somebody say ignorant. Oh, you're just ignorant, boy.
Yeah,
Nah, I got you.
but what was the second point I was gonna mention? Well, I just blanked out. Sorry, but yeah, no, like I 100% agree with you, Andrew. Um, oh yeah, so I think I have a theory. I think what you find, like when we interview more people, you're gonna see how much people, how much their communities were involved, or family members or friends were involved in their education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because perhaps from their growing up, there hasn't been that generational knowledge or generational wealth there to support them, right? So you've had to had, for me and my, you said your family, your pastor, your church helped you in your education, and I have a similar story with mine where my pastor encouraged me to pursue higher ed. And so I find that, I'm thinking in my head, my hypothesis is that you're going to find a lot of people, particularly people of color, have needed to have that communal support to succeed, because they don't have the familiar generational wealth backing them up as other more affluent communities might have.
Yeah, and I think I have I found like a fact sheet from like the Department of Education, and they kind of highlight some of the issues and some of the ways that we can kind of increase STEM participation within the Black community specifically. And they definitely kind of highlight the point that you're talking about. And they mention like, hey, a lot of African American students at a young age, they don't really feel like there's a place for them in STEM, and there's not really a big awareness of, hey, what is STEM, what do STEM professionals do. So I think this podcast kind of fills that niche, or that need per se. um and I'm looking forward to the impact that it possibly could have. I think you're right 100%. Like if you grow up around engineers and your dad or your uncle or so and so is an engineer or whatever the case may be, like it's just second nature to be like, okay, if nothing else, I'll be an engineer. But your
Exactly.
parents are like blue collar workers, or if they're not in, I don't want to make it seem like I'm putting down on anybody,
No.
but if they're not in that specific area where it's like you don't even know, that your parents don't know, your inner circle don't know,
Right.
and your teachers aren't telling you this stuff at school, then you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of left like, okay, I don't even know what STEM is. Like,
Right.
what does STEM stand for? First of all, science, technology, engineering, and math. So like a lot of people, some people may not even know that if they're not in a certain environment. And I think going back to this fact sheet that I was talking about earlier, like I'll probably share it later, maybe share my screen or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they talk about one of the points that they identify for increasing STEM participation within the Black community is specifically like highlighting like historical people of color, people throughout history Black and brown people throughout history that have made significant contributions, and I think that's really big. Of course, we
Mhm.
do it in like February, where they make like one or
The,
two
the
references to like Black people, and
the
like
shortest month of the year.
I know, right? And then like you got one day in each in the month of February dedicated to somebody different. So it's like
Yeah.
we need to do better with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if we can highlight, and I think we're this podcast is going to be great. Um, and next we can kind of talk about like what is this podcast going to do specifically. But I
Yeah.
think this
Yeah.
podcast is going
Sure.
to be great at like highlighting some people, and we'll get a chance to introduce some really cool people. Um, and people will kind of feel like, hey, maybe I want to pursue STEM. Maybe I want to be a data scientist or engineer
Yep.
or whatever the case may be. So,
Yeah.
um,
No,
looking forward to it.
absolutely.
But yeah,
But
man, go ahead. You had anything to add?
yeah, yeah. I had a couple things to add. Uh, it's gonna be great to see how different all these custom journeys, right?
Yeah,
That come our way, and also another thought that came to mind is many thoughts, but we have all the barriers we have listed here in a Google Doc, all the typical barriers that people of color face when trying to pursue STEM, and one of them is imposter syndrome, and just the fact of having people on here that come from our communities that have succeeded in STEM, I think that will go a long way, 100%. Um, and I'm definitely looking forward to that, to talking to
yep,
more folks, yeah, and getting
I
their
agree.
story.
Awesome. All right, man. So um let's talk about the podcast and like what we're gonna be like specifically doing and discussing, and some of the neat things that we have coming up. So I guess number one, we should start with the name, right? Because we were like going back and forth about, yo, what is the name of this gonna be, and we came up with some pretty interesting names like custom dreams.
Yes.
It'll be pronounced like custom
Yep.
dreams, but it's spelled CUSTEM for STEM dreams.
Right.
What'd you say you had one from like from root to stem?
From the
Or
root to the stem, something like that.
yeah,
I think I had dreams or black and brown nerds. I think that was one that I put down. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, they weren't all winners. Uh,
yeah.
yeah. I'll give a little bit. I'll give more credit to Andrew for the name. I think I might have mentioned Journeys, but he's the one that actually was creative with custom. So kudos to you, man.
Yeah.
I don't think I was putting up anything good.
Well, it's a collaboration, but I think we came up with something good and unique. So custom dreams, or well, I'll just say like custom dreams. But again, custom is spelled CU, capital S, capital T, capital E, capital M, and custom. Oh, I'm sorry, custom journeys. Did I say dreams earlier?
You did, but that's fine.
Okay, but
I think
anyway,
yeah.
yeah, but
It'll interchange. Go ahead.
but yeah, man, we're I think the reason why we settled on that name, or we decided on that name, was because a big part of the podcast is going to be talking to different people and kind of discussing their journeys through STEM. And
Right.
me and Eli will have our own dedicated episodes where we kind of talk about our journeys to becoming STEM professionals, and then we'll have a number of really exciting, interesting guests come on, people that are entrepreneurs, professional engineers, people that are recent graduates working in oil and gas or in tech or whatever. So I mean, and then we'll have some great people that we don't even know at the moment. I mean, hopefully one day we'll have some Elon Musk or whoever, some really well-known guests. But I think just the people that we have within our network, that we met throughout our years of college and professional career, I think that's a really great starting point. And I think a lot of students and a lot of listeners will be able to relate to that. So that's kind of where the name came from, exploring people's journeys and kind of introducing you to an array of people that are really awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
And we won't only talk to professional STEM professionals. We'll probably end up talking to educators in STEM. I definitely would like to have college counselors and high school counselors on the podcast to talk about that. Um, and maybe some subject matter experts to talk to us about maybe some of the issues. underlying issues to people of color going to STEM, or the barriers that prevent people of color going to STEM. And yeah, I'm looking forward to just learning, man, to learning more, expanding my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think those academics, the high school counselors, and I think they really have a really interesting perspective, and we'll learn a lot about like what's going on currently and how we can improve things. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. So that's kind of where the name comes from or originates from. And like I said, I think we'll have some really good guests come on. And then a big part of what we're gonna do, like we already kind of hinted at this, was um, while interviewing people, or even in just episodes where it's just me and Eliseo, also like discussing different barriers. And one of the barriers that we talked about earlier was like the biggest one to me is like, or I shouldn't say the biggest. One of the biggest is like
Right.
finances. So the financial aspect of things, and I think what's really interesting and what I'm really interested to see how it will play out is there's like over the past probably 5 years, and it's really been accelerated with this year with this pandemic and what's happened this year, is it's really been a big push for like e-learning, so like online learning, course certificates and
Right.
things of that nature. So historically, where you might have had to pay like 20 grand a year for a college education, now you have products and companies out there like Coursera. I think they're probably like the number one um, product out there, but like Coursera and Udemy and stuff like that, where or even man, what's the world? It's a lot of different coding boot camps. There's a lot of different products out there now
Right.
that offer a similar product where hey, they're you pay on a monthly subscription basis at a much lower price than what you would traditionally pay for a tuition. So
Right.
like 30 or 40 bucks a month to get a certification. And these are certifications for very in-demand STEM jobs. So I'm really curious to see how these things will play out and how universities will try to like compete with that, right? Because um, one of the big things that came out recently is that Google is partnering with Coursera to offer a number of different courses or a number of different certifications, and they're kind of guaranteeing, or one of their claims is that hey, um, you can get this certification probably within 6 months, and you don't need any previous experience, and then you can get an entry level job at one of our um, companies that we're partnering with. So I think they're partnering with like 100 different companies. And
Wow.
so one of the unique things is like, hey, they're saying, hey, you can get the certification in 6 months, and then you're pretty much, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but you have a really good opportunity to get an entry level position in business analytics or
Mm-hmm.
project management
Mm-hmm.
or what is it, like user experience. They have a number of different things out there that you can do. But I mean, if I'm if I rewind back to when I was getting ready to go to college, if I wasn't completely set on being a major in engineer, being an engineering major, and the option is, hey, you can take out 15 or 20 grand in loans
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to start your engineering degree
Right.
versus, hey, maybe take a semester off, pay 30, 40 bucks a month and take a get a certification. I'm gonna pay 40 bucks a month, see if I like it, and then go get a job where I can get paid like 50 or 60 starting out at like 18, 19. That's just me personally, but I'm interested to see how this plays out. And I think it's gonna be a really interesting story. And I think years from now, we're gonna be like, yo, man, it was a lot of universities that had to shut down because
Right.
they just couldn't compete. And but yeah, that kind of, to me, that funding aspect or that funding barrier, I feel like that's slowly being torn down. But I'm really interested to see how things play out in the long run.
No, no, for sure. I think, especially as someone that's working at a university level now, I can tell you that things are going to change. Um, I don't know if we'll go back to full virtual, but full virtual has forced universities to develop new technologies and to invest particularly in new technologies. So, but the question is for me, for that is, I mean, having a laptop has been essential to be a student, since we were, even maybe our parents'
Yeah,
generation, but especially our generation. I remember I definitely needed a laptop. Um, and nowadays, you need a good laptop and a good internet a connection, and so that's something that some maybe some people of color have to face, is not being able to have good internet. depending on what zip code they live in, right?
Yep.
So I think that brings up that other issue. Additionally, I want you mentioned non-traditional routes, so we want to emphasize this is custom journeys. We're going to address, and we're both particularly interested, as Andrew just went through, in talking about non-traditional routes. And one thing I want to emphasize is that in STEM, one of those letters stands for technology. And in my opinion, part of STEM is not just the engineers or the degree holding professionals, but also the technologists, the coders, the machinists, the electricians, etc. All those career tracks are part for me of that T in STEM. You know, without the machinist, an engineer would never have their design get off the ground, right? And that's why when not sorry, I'm thinking previously, but in the way we're going to publish this later, when we talk to Andrew, he speaks to this when he talks about his experiences at GM. Because there, and you can talk about this if you want, Andrew. There are different groups of people. You have the manufacturing plant, and some of those folks did not have college degrees, but still found
Hmm.
success working at GM. So I'm definitely interested in exploring those non-traditional routes and show that that is a viable career path where you can succeed.
Definitely. Yeah, so there's a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different pathways to get into STEM. You're right, and I'm looking forward to that as well. But I think there's a lot more involved with STEM than what people may initially think. So
Absolutely.
like STEM, a lot of people might you hear the word STEM, you might think, oh, okay, somebody in a lab standing there with a white coat on and a beaker in their hand,
Right.
or an engineer, or but it's a lot of different pathways to get involved with it, and I think the way as technology as technology advances, the rate of innovation just increases. So like 5-10 years from now, there's going to be jobs and opportunities out there that today we can't even really think of. Um, it's just going to be amazing the way things take off. So that's going to be very curious, and I think people hopefully will get a glimpse through this podcast of different ways that they can get into the STEM field. Real quick before, so like we were talking about funding real quick,
Yeah.
and how like different universities are gonna have to like compete or whatever, or how things will kind of play out as far as like going completely virtual or not. What do you? What I'll give my opinion real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna be hard to me. It's gonna be hard to like if I can literally say, hey, I'm gonna go get this certification in data science and I know I'll get a job. Or the alternative is go to this university and I have to take out loans because I don't have any scholarship money. Like, how is a university going to compete with that? So that's just my thoughts initially. I think it'll impact a lot of universities differently, especially. Or but what are your thoughts overall as far as like how this pandemic and how the technology changing and advancing will impact student enrollment into traditional colleges in the future?
Okay. Gotcha. It's a profound question, and I'm gonna attempt to answer it off the cuff. But the first thing I can think of is this pandemic has really shown the limitations of virtual learning. I think we're getting pushed to its limit. No doubt that as the technology gets better, some things will get a little bit more easier to do virtually. But there are portions of the virtual experience, there are portions of the in person experience that cannot be replaced by virtual yet. In particular, especially in STEM, the lab experience, the experience working in a machine shop, collaborating in a group, and presenting in front of a group. Those aspects of in-person learning for now are not. There isn't an equivalent, or yeah, in the virtual environment. There are approximations. Through Zoom, you can do breakout rooms, but
Yeah.
from my short-lived experience thus far, the virtual collaboration environment is very difficult and requires a lot of coordination and, to be honest, a lot of maturity. And part of the experience in college is learning how to mature and manage your own time. And the virtual environment forces students to um, to do time management very quickly, and I think in some cases too quickly. In addition, it's very incompatible with special needs.
Mm.
People with ADHD, with any kind of learning disability, they have a really hard time with online learning. So my point is there's still a lot of barriers to virtual learning that I think are not going to be easily replaced within the next 5-10 years. I think in person is still going to be the best vehicle for education for now. But that being said, the virtual environment does expand more opportunities for people that might live remotely, that work at home, or have kids. Um, but like I said, that requires her, being able to have a good computer and good broadband.
Yep.
So it's a profound question, but that's my quick take.
One of the other barriers that we kind of identified is like the lack of like generational knowledge and generational wealth. So we kind of hit on this earlier, where um, kind of if you're already in that environment of like having parents and aunties and uncles and cousins and so on and so forth that are in a STEM field. They're already an engineer. They're already a biologist or a researcher or whatever. Um, a lot of your thought process is completely different. So I guess like your mindset as a child, a lot of time, well, just in general, they have that saying where like you're like the square root or you're like the square sum of all the people within your inner circle. And so like if your inner circle
Right.
is like just sports or just music or entertainment, a lot of times you're going to lean towards that direction. And those are all like interesting fields to get into. I love all those things, but at the same time, um, if you can get yourself in an environment where you're more surrounded by STEM professionals, or if you don't come from a family of STEM professionals, I think it's a little bit
Exactly.
more challenging
Exactly.
to kind of get started and kickstart your career.
Exactly. And yeah, that's why I made the point. I felt that my life. My mom was when she first came to this country, she cleaned houses and then became a nurse later on. My dad was a construction worker.
Yeah.
Um, we did have some higher ed professionals, but they were back in El Salvador, and they weren't professionals until after the war ended. So I was very fortunate to have educators, K through 12 educators, that exposed me to STEM. And so that's why, I think that point is so important that you mentioned, is that just exposing students and young people to different career paths that can be as equally successful, as in sports or in art or in music, right?
Mhm.
That are viable. And I think one issue I hope in this podcast we can absolutely demolish is the notion that you have to be a singular genius to succeed in STEM.
Yeah, that we have to work on demolishing that barrier
I
because
think
I
this is
think
a
that's
gigantic issue. Go ahead.
yeah, no, you're right, and I think I talked about that in the interview where you in the episode where you interviewed me. Is like when I started off, I thought the same way. I was like, yo, I'm not a baby Einstein. How am I going to be able to be an engineer? So when I thought of an engineer like in high school, I thought of like the Thomas Edisons or Nikola Teslas or like the greatest of the greats. And I was kind of like, yo, I'm not at that level of intelligence. I'm not that intelligent. So how am I going to be able to do it? How am I going to be able to become an engineer? And so I think that's like a very big misconception that people of color don't have a place in STEM, and also that it's a very bad misconception that you need to be some super level
Yeah,
Elon Musk or whatever.
Dexter's lab.
Yeah, man. You don't have to be like that. Like, if you got the passion and the interest and you're willing to work and learn, then I mean, you'll be fine. Um,
Think about this. NFL players. At what age do they begin playing football?
that's a great point. I mean, I swear I wanted to be an NFL player, but I can't even remember what age I started playing football. And I'm not even on an organized level, just like in the neighborhood where we play like every day. So, I mean, even as a young kid, like maybe like I'll say is I'll say 10, but I know it was younger than that. It was like, yo, I want to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
So it's like you're playing football every day with the goal of hopefully one day becoming an NFL player. I think with STEM, a lot of times we take the approach of like you spend the first 17 and a half years of your life like just having fun, not really learning about what opportunities are out there. And then like the last semester of high school or your last year of high school, you're like, oh shoot, what am I gonna do like with my life? Like what am I gonna study? And I think that's like the completely wrong approach to take. I think you have to start early on, like exposing your kids to things and teach, just kind of planting those seeds of, hey, this is what an engineer is. Hey, this is what an engineer. These are the problems that they solve. These are the problems that like a mathematician or a data scientist or a chemist or a physics major. These are things that they try to do and how they help the
Mm-hmm.
world and make things better. So I think we have to start early on, like get your kids into science fair projects, get them involved,
Yep.
take them to different coding boot camps at a young age. And I
Yep.
think there's a lot of more options out there than
Yep.
there were years ago. So
Yep.
where they have summer programs across the world, across the country that people can be involved in.
Exactly. It takes decades for an NFL player to hone in on their skills. It
Yeah.
takes years before an artist breaks out with a hit album. Why don't we have the same expectations for other career paths? A doctor takes 8, 12 years
Mm-hmm.
to even get started working professionally. you know it's it's not about how smart you are, is how tenacious you are, how much you want something. So I
100%.
it's, to me, it's like it's the same thing. There's, I think, I have to remember where this quote is from, but I heard that it's like it takes about 10,000 hours to get really good at something, to become an
Yep.
expert.
Yep.
And that applies to football, soccer, to sports, to artists, and also to STEM people. um and so
That's a
yeah. Yeah.
that's a great analogy, Eli.
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
Because people's like, oh, I want to be a football player, I want to be an artist, and that's fine. But the thing is, still, not everyone's going to be LeBron James. Okay, LeBron
LeBron
James
James.
is a singular talented athlete. Okay,
Yeah.
I ain't going to be LeBron James, but you know what? I probably, the one thing I would want to emulate is his work ethic. It might not
Yeah.
be in sports, but it's going to be, in what I'm doing, my PhD, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's yeah, that's what it really comes down to. I mean, in my community, we call it ganas. ¿Cuántas ganas tienes? How much do you want it? You know, um,
Nice.
and yeah, to me, that's what it comes down to. And I hope in this podcast we can bring more examples
Yeah.
of that to light.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's powerful, and I think I didn't even think about that, but you're right. And using that sport analogy, like LeBron James, what is he like 6'8", 250 pounds? Like he's just naturally built different.
Yep,
Like he's naturally inclined to be the best player in the world, but he wouldn't have got there if he didn't put in that work. And then
exactly.
at the same token, like how many times have you seen like you see like Nate Robinson? Nate Robinson is probably like my height. So like you have like smaller guys or like people that don't look like they should have made it. Like Tom Brady, look how Tom Brady is built. Like Tom Brady, if you look at like his NFL combine picture, he looks like some middle-aged dad. I'm talking about like 22. He looked like a middle-aged dad that like didn't step in a weight room.
Yeah.
And but the work he put in led him to being like the best in history. So I
Right.
think some people are going to be naturally more inclined to excel at STEM. So naturally, they're going to just be able to pick up stuff like that and just get information, grasp information easy. But the people that, not everybody's going to be like that, but the people that want to do it and put in the work, like you said, what do you say, Ganas?
Ganas.
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 But yeah, man, the people that want it and willing to put in that hard work, they'll outlast the other people that don't want it
Yep.
and aren't willing to put in the same work.
And I'm gonna do, Andrew, you did your homework today. I'm gonna do my homework and bring some more STEM specific examples of that.
Yeah.
Like, I know Einstein in particular. So you know, he he developed his theories um, of the general relativity and special relativity while he was a patent clerk. So that was his side hustle.
Uh,
And it wasn't until later in his life, past his midlife, that he found success. So even then, it took him decades and decades of work.
yeah.
It's just that, unfortunately, our short attention span society, we only see, okay, he got the Nobel Prize. But
Yeah.
no, that is the culmination of decades of work. And even like some of his theories weren't even proven until after his death. So, I mean, you want to talk about Einstein? Even him, he
Yeah.
had his struggles. You know, he wasn't a singular genius right at the beginning. He needed to have guidance too. You know, and he had to go through the struggle. So
Man,
yeah, and people don't know that. You know, he was working a full time job while trying to develop his theories.
that's crazy.
You know, so I mean,
Wow.
yeah, and that's not to say that I don't want to call people dumb. I just want to say, you have as much capability, mental capacity as an Einstein. It's just how much do you want it, and what are you, honestly interested in doing. Maybe you're
Yeah.
not interested in physics, but maybe it's something else. And if you want to succeed in that, you have to put in a LeBron James, an Einstein level of effort to get
Yeah.
there. It's about the guidance, it's about the effort at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
I think what you really need is the passion behind it. But I think that passion, having that passion, will help make that. Um, it'll help make you'll want to put in that amount of work. Basically, like the kids that want to go to the league and be in the NFL or be in the NBA, they're playing basketball or playing football like all day and night. Um, like even if they don't make it to the league, they still have that passion to play that sport. And I think you need to find something in life that you're passionate about on that level where you almost could have like an obsessive fixation on it. And I think the people that become like really successful at whatever it is, and it can be anything STEM related, it can be helping people, it can be teaching.
Yep.
I think they really have a passion behind what
Yeah.
they do.
Shout out to the teachers.
Yeah, man, teachers underappreciated, greatly underappreciated. But yeah,
Underpaid.
all of that. But yeah, man. So that's another barrier. We kind of talked about too there, like lack of generational knowledge and wealth, as well as like
Yep.
imposter syndrome,
We touched on it.
um, in a way. So, did you have anything else to add there?
Not really. I mean, the only thing I would add with tuition, I think that's one of the, like you said, one of the main issues. Um, and I think one interesting thing we can talk about is in this podcast, we do want to touch on federal state policies that affect public education. Um, and because definitely, I think that's part of the problem as well. I talk about how teachers are underpaid, but I think a lot of the issues come down to funding in general and in higher ed. And I have particular hot takes about it. We can talk about
Yeah,
those in another podcast. Um, but I think the way we fund education in this country is a big problem, and would solve not all of the issues, but would help alleviate some of the issues that face people of color if simply there were more funding funneled into public education. One hot take I'll give:
go ahead.
I believe that education is a human right, and no child should have to pay a cent of tuition. If they choose to go to college or go to vocational training, they shouldn't have to pay a cent. It is an
Gotcha.
investment into society. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
I know that's big
Okay.
words. Big words.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, we gotta have like a. Yeah, that's gonna be a good one. Yeah, we gotta have like an episode for that. No, my mind is going towards like right now there's a big effort and a big push, and there's been new news reports lately that Biden is asking his administration to look in President Biden is asking his administration to look into canceling $50,000 worth of student debt.
Do
So
it.
I think huh? You
I
said do
said,
it?
yeah, do it.
So yeah, I think it's two separate issues. I think there's one conversation about like canceling student debt, and there's another situation that's about like, hey, what's already happened, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They screwed up the system. They said, hey, you have to go to college to get a good job.
Yep.
We need these jobs, and then they just let the university and the campuses go crazy with like tuition prices and everything else.
Right.
And there wasn't at the time there wasn't an alternative. That's why I'm really
Exactly.
interested in like the Coursera's of the world because
Mm,
I don't think we can dig ourselves with competition. Like the market has to react. Like this education system in America had no competition for the longest.
hmm.
Like it was like, hey, do you want to go to this four-year university,
Mm.
public in-state,
Right.
public state
Right.
school, or private school, whatever? But it was all the same. Now it's like, okay, do I want to pay $40 a month, or do I want to pay 40 grand a year? Now it's like the 40 grand a year, that price has to come down, because the customer, the student, they're not going to see the value of what the hell is 40 grand going to get me when I can get the same thing for $40 a month. So I
Right.
think in some scenarios, so let me back up. The student debt crisis is one issue.
Yeah.
Moving forward, I kind of agree with you, and we can have another episode about it. But as far as like moving forward, if if you just look at things from like a technological standpoint of like, hey, where does America rank in the country or in the world as far as like technology? And I remember learning in school about superpowers and how, hey, America has been like the biggest superpower.
Yeah.
Technology and who's the most technologically advanced, I think that's going to determine the true superpower moving forward. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think if we don't take a serious look at the educational system and think about, hey,
Yep.
what does our workforce look like? What is our workforce trained for? What technology are we creating? Because right now we have Apple, you have Microsoft, you have Tesla. These are American companies, but if you look across the Pacific at China, um, they're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and they're really, really advanced. Even if you look at the way that they responded to COVID, like how quickly they were throwing up hospitals.
Yep.
Like I was like, they throwing up hospitals in like a month or less.
Right.
And you look at like how long it takes, like a decade to build a freeway in the state of Texas. Um, I don't
And they're
right
not building
now.
freeways; they're building rail. By the
That's
way.
another. Is I'm like, yo, if y'all don't look, y'all can decide. America can. Let me calm down. If America doesn't really take a look at our education system and the talent that we're producing, and if they don't take a serious look at the minorities in
The talent we're
particular,
squandering.
yeah, if they don't, we don't take a serious look at the black and brown people in this country and how this is a great opportunity to reach into these black and brown communities and say, hey, let's support you better. Let's not fail you. Let's work with you. Um, I think we're gonna be looking up in like 10 to 20 years and be like, yo, we're not the leaders of this world. And we're gonna be struggling trying to
One
catch up. And it might
100
be too late. And
100%. 100.
yeah, we got to look at that, man. We got to really, really,
Wow.
really look at the educational system and decide to get serious about making investments. And I think if we want to keep our competitive advantage, me personally, I believe one of the best ways to do it is to invest in black and brown kids and get them engaged within STEM and work on retaining those talented students. Because it's not gonna be just we have to do it collectively, white, black, brown, whatever. It has to be a collective effort, and I think we have to dedicate the resources um, where they're needed. And I think the black and brown people need them a lot.
100%. 100%. We're going to have to ask black brown people to save us again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
No, 100%, man. Woo. There's a lot more I can say, but I don't know. Do we want to close there? Do it something else we want to talk about before we
Nah,
close?
let's leave it there, man. Leave them on the edge
Okay.
of their seat.
Yeah,
But
let's do that. One hot take per, or let's do one hot take each host per episode or whatever.
yeah, man. But no, I would love to like have a more detailed conversation. We can look at the numbers exactly and see, hey, what is like. I know, I think Joe Biden is coming up with like his infrastructure plan, but we can see specifically like what is he coming up with for education,
Yeah,
and how is he
absolutely,
investing in that, and we can
absolutely.
look at um, what the future holds. Um, I did have one other thing I want to share, and I might share my screen for this,
Go for it.
just because I think it kind of speaks to like the importance of this podcast. I just want to share this real quick. So like I got to go back and see what year this was made. I think it was maybe like 2014, 15, 16 timeframe. I got to go back and check, but essentially it talks about a few different talks kind of about the numbers of African American students pursuing STEM. And I'm not going to go through the entire document points, and then I really want to talk about the end of the document. But really, the main thing I kind of wanted to talk about is at the end of this document from the Department of Education, they have 3 different ways to support STEM success among African American students. Number one, they say provide additional support to students pursuing STEM degrees. And what they mean by that is that African American students are more likely than any other racial group to switch their majors from STEM to non-STEM programs. Upperclassmen mentorship, academic support services, and growth mindset messaging can increase resilience. So there's number one, there's a problem of getting students, black and brown students, to go into STEM. But then number two, STEM is not the easiest thing in the world, like we talked about. So
Right.
you have to be able to put in the work, and we need to work on retention of those students that are pursuing STEM. And I think one of the ways we can do that, like they talk about, is mentorship and
Mm-hmm.
academic
Mm-hmm.
support services.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get in there, to me, I'm a visual person. Like if I see, and I talk about this where you interview me,
Yep.
if I when I got in the engineering program, I saw like upperclassmen that were black and they were doing well. So I'm like, okay, they doing it. I can do it. I know I can do it. Like that
Exactly.
visual confirmation, because
Exactly.
initially I had that imposter syndrome where it's like,
Normalized in your
yeah,
head. Mm-hmm.
exactly. I had that imposter syndrome where like, I don't think I'm smart enough to do this. But when I get in the door and I'm like, okay, they doing it, I can do it. Like you said, it's normalized to me. So I think that's one potential solution there. Number two, for the ways to support STEM success among Blacks, create and connect students to additional opportunities outside of the classroom to develop skills. This can include after-school programs, museum visits, conversations at home. So I think this really goes to, we kind of talked about your network, right? Your inner circle, your
Yes.
family,
Absolutely.
your counselors, all those things. I think you need to, don't just rely on the school system to teach your kids what STEM is, and I think you really got to look for opportunities outside of the classroom, like we talked about coding boot camps, coding summer camps, and things of that nature. Look for a way to kind of embed your kid into these different opportunities. And then number three, uh, expose students to African Americans who have succeeded in STEM careers.
Mm-hmm.
African American
Mm-hmm.
students
Mm-hmm.
do not see themselves as having a place in STEM. Schools can do this by highlighting scientists of colors in their curriculum. At home, having conversations about history of African American excellence in STEM can also be a source of encouragement. That speaks for itself. We talked about Black History Month in February, being the shortest month, and you
Yeah.
might take a couple, one day a week, and talk about a different Black scientist or inventor.
Right. And
I think,
someone other than George Washington Carver.
oh my goodness, if I hear about the peanuts one more time, it's a lot more, right? I think
No, he's the only one. I think he's the only one. Actually, the Peanuts guy. Yep.
That's the way they would have you think it, man. I mean, Black History Month, to me, it was George Washington Carver, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. And then you may learn about Tiger Woods, but Tiger Woods is on the TV. Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan. So it was like, we got to do better. And I, to be honest though, I do. Looking at social media in February, it seems like there's a more of an effort there. I'm not in the classroom, so I don't really know um, K through 12 how well the school system is doing, but I think this is one of the. I think all of these bullet points, 1 through 3, is where our podcast can really have a big impact. But especially number 3, right? Because you
100%.
interviewing me interviewing you, and then the other guests that we're gonna have on, the Black and brown guests, the men and women, the people of all walks, telling their journeys, their stories of how they got to where they're at. I think kids being able to see that and hear their stories, I think they'll be encouraged, and it'll be more normalized to them. Like, hey, like, oh yeah, my friend on Custom Journeys was whatever. He became an engineer. He became a data scientist. He became a professor. Ellie Sales, a professor. He's
Oh
a
yeah.
NASA researcher, whatever the case may be. So I think that like our podcast can help all these bullet points, but especially number 3, where we're um, kind of helping students be exposed to more stories, but then also helping students see themselves in the future as a STEM professional. So that's all I wanted to share, man.
I think that's amazing. And yeah, that's pretty much, if there was a better summary of our mission statements right there. The only thing I want to add is, recently I was very fortunate to be part of, or to listen in on a talk by former astronaut Jose Hernandez, and he's a Mexican American, and his parents were so his parents were I'm not going to say undocumented immigrants. They were immigrants, but they
Mm-hmm.
were around before the border was a thing. I'll just put it that way.
Mm.
And so they only became immigrants when the border was drawn, right? But anyway, his parents were farmers, and so he went through his life story of how he went from helping his dad out in the fields and then becoming an astronaut later in his life. And
Mm.
so, I mean, he's the type of person I would love to interview because his journey was very custom.
Yeah.
And he was on a on one of the space shuttle missions in the '90s, and
Wow.
so that's the type of journey I want to hear about as well, and expose more people to, just to to show that again like you were saying it takes the effort. It's not
Yeah.
these things are possible. We are just as dignified. We're just as
Capable.
capable of reaching these careers. And that's
Definitely.
bottom line.
100%, man. 100%.
All right, you inspired yet? You pumped?
I got calmed down, man.
All
Sometimes
right.
I be getting too hype, you
You got
know.
that preaching juice flowing.
Hey man, don't get me started, boy.
That's why I
Start
asked
hollering.
if you came from a Baptist church, because my family also came from a Baptist church, and so we talked about that preaching juice starts to come down a little bit.
Yeah, I ain't gonna get deep into it because people come from all walks of life, but them Pentecost people, boy, no, or not. I don't know if they Pentecost, but them snake biting people that be having snakes in the pulpit. It's yeah, each denomination has its differences, but yeah, no, that I gotta calm down, boy. I feel like I just gave my sermon, drank my water, so I'm gonna chill out for a second. But before we get into homework, I don't
Sorry,
know if you have
I'm
any
sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry.
but no, man, I think that's a really good um introduction to what this podcast is. And we kind of talked about some of the different purposes it'll serve, some of the different questions that I think we'll answer, and some of the ways we'll be a resource to people. And yeah, man, I'm excited. I say this all the time, online and offline. I'm excited to do this with you. I think we can make a good partnership. I'm looking forward to the impact that we could have in the community. And yeah, I don't really have anything else other than homework. So homework. Oh, we should probably touch on what this
What's
is.
my homework?
So homework for those just hearing this and for future potential guests is like we always try to give like people a resource, whether it's a financial scholarship or like some program or something out there that people can use to help help get into STEM or help continue their STEM journey. Um, I did find one. I didn't do a lot of research on this one yet, but I did find one pretty interesting um, resource out there. It's called Color Stack. Boy, I'm tongue tied today. My allergies are messing with me, and I'm tongue tied. It's called colorstack.org. COLORSTACK.org. And so my understanding of this organization, it was started by a black guy that was a computer science major at Cornell. He saw that there was a really, really big lack of diversity within computer science. And so he created this organization to be a resource to different students that think they might be interested in computer science. So it looks like I haven't looked at them in great, great detail. So I'll probably maybe reach out to them and see if number one, maybe they want to come on and talk about their organization. But then also
Let's do it.
I'll come back and see if there's any additional information that I can provide you about them. But it looks like they number one try to be a resource for different students that want to pursue computer science. So that computer science is computer programming. So any software that you use has a computer scientist behind it,
Yes.
from Google, Facebook, etc. So it looks like they have like a newsletter that you can join. They probably have some additional resources where they might be trying to teach people different skills. But I would definitely encourage you to check it out. It's called colorstack.org. And yeah, I think it can be a good resource for you to kind of, if you're interested in computer science, maybe learn more about it. And then also maybe they provide some different opportunities for career development as well as academic support. So check them out, see what they have to offer, and yeah, I think that's. I don't know if you have anything to add, Eli. If not, it's perfectly fine. I know we'll probably go back and forth where you have um, your recommendations. You had a really good one last week. I forgot what it was.
Yeah, it was cafecollege.org. Um, I'll just say that again and talk about it. I didn't do my homework, but no, I'll get into the habit of doing that. I think it'd be good if I can at least bring a resource. But yeah, cafecollege.org. It is a nonprofit organization here in San Antonio, and essentially they provide college counseling services. Also, they provide seminars on time management, on study skills, and other skills to help you succeed in college. And it's actually a very underrated organization. Not very well known, but it is there. And yeah, people should log on and check it out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really good, man. So yeah, so that pretty much concludes this episode. You got something to add, Eliseo?
Uh, I can't believe we just talked for an hour and a half.
Man,
Time
we did that.
flies. Time
I
flies,
know,
and
right?
that's what I love. I think that's what I think. Look, I think that this is why I think we're gonna be successful, is because we can talk about this for hours, man.
Yeah.
You know.
We'll have to figure out the timing part, but it's all good content. Hopefully it's helpful for you guys.
Yeah.
I know some people have shorter attention spans, so we'll try to be like consistent with that, but
Yeah.
work with this. We just starting out, but
Bear with us. But I think
yeah.
what you find is what we have to say and share is going to be extraordinarily helpful to everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew, again, for making that phone call, for allowing me the opportunity to just share my experiences with people and, have facilitating these conversations. I think it's going to be good. It's going to be a good thing, man.
All right. Take us home in prayer, Eli. No, I'm messing with you. All right, thank you guys again, man. That's pretty much all she wrote. This is the end of this episode 0,
Of
or
custom
Custom
journeys.
Journeys.
Yes.
And I'm Andrew Baines.
Eliseo Iglesias.
And we out.